in this video, I'm going to talk about a couple of things. My baby's actually holding the camera for me right now, so I can do this. But since I've got the composite leaf spring off of my 17 Corvette Z06 07, I'm going to talk about two things. First, since I have it off, I can talk about how you lower it. Of course, a lot of people know how to do that, tons of videos. But essentially, when you lower this car, there's essentially a hex pattern nut on top, and all you do is just back this nut out. And the way you can do that is, if you have a lift like me, you can put jack stands under the lower control arm, the lower A arm, and then lower it down, and it relieves the pressure off of the leaf spring. That's the key. You want to relieve the pressure, and then that allows you to essentially just back that, you're going this way. When you're stock, this thing probably sits back about this far. So what you want to do is you want to back it all the way up as far as it goes, and that'll probably lower your car about 1.5 inches. Now, what others do when they want to basically slam their car, which I don't recommend, this is as far as I would go. And there are aftermarket lowering bolts. But what they do is they cut half of this bushing off, and it's just rubber. They cut that off, and then that allows you to essentially seat that lowering bolt further, which lowers the car another, 3/4 inches possibly, something like that. But so yeah, this is the composite leaf spring off of a Z07, and so now Lady's gonna hand me the camera, and I'm gonna walk you through how you get the leaf spring out of the car, and that is a little tricky. And not many people need to do this, so I don't know if there's a lot of videos out there on this subject. So that's why I kind of wanted to touch on this topic. So the composite leaf spring essentially has some rubber bushings around it, and they seat up in here in the subframe. So it's right on the subframe. They've got this recessed area where they seat with 2 bolts. All right. So anyway, when the car has the transverse leaf spring is in the car under pressure, under load. It doesn't take much to fasten or hold it down. So there's just 2 bolts essentially on each side that hold that down. All right, so here's what I want to get to. And the reason that I'm actually taking this composite leaf spring or transverse leaf spring off, which is composite, is because I want to get the oil pan out of the car. And that leaf spring blocks the front 2 bolts to that. So that's the reason. And to show you how you get that leaf spring out of the car, the easiest way is you basically just unbolt the upper A-arm. So not a big deal. I think those are like 13 millimeters, something like that. You want to make sure that you watch the washers behind here. There's a set of washers behind those brackets there, so they will fall out and they'll go missing, and don't forget to put them back. And then you've got 2, I believe, 18 millimeter or 19 millimeter upper shock bolts that need to come out. And then when that happens, essentially your control arms will swing down, and you're still not going to get enough room. So that's the catch. So you're going to have to undo your steering rack bolts, and that's no big deal. It's just, I believe it's a deep socket, like 14 millimeters, something like that. So when you pop that bolt off, you'll basically take your steering rack off, and that will allow it to drop some more. But you're still not going to get enough to get, because if you see that recessed area right in here, like this, that is where the seat of that composite leaf spring, the lowering bolt, sits. And you see that raised edge? That's the problem. You can't just slide it out easily. It wants to catch on that raised edge. Thank you, Jim, for that, by the way. So to get it low enough you got to do one more step, which is popping off the sway bar. So there's a long, I want to say 17 millimeter, I can't remember, a long bolt that right there. So it'll come straight down, and then you've got like a 14 or I think a 13, something like that right there. And this has got a pin in it that helps you sort of lock that sway bar in where you can sort of put the bolts in easier. It just helps you seat it easier. But anyway, the sway bar will drop down, and then once you get the sway bar to drop down, then the entire assembly, the control arms will drop down far enough. And you can see I've still got the sway bar attached here. So that's a big deal, not having to, you know, take apart or pull off more than you need. Now, the only catch, and what I would highly recommend is having the magnetic shocks, which you're going to have on a Z06. Make sure that you disconnect the harness up top in the engine bay. It runs right through that hole, and if this thing drops down this far, you're probably going to pop that wire, and that's bad. You know, then you're probably going to have new shocks, or just some good soldering skills, whatever. But you may break the harness, and if you break it on, you know, on the engine side, that's bad, because there's not a lot of room. I mean, it is really tight up in there where that harness is. So you can see, I mean, this thing actually gets down really, really far once you get all of those pieces that I talked about off. And if you're concerned about the, you know, all of the lines, you know, like your ABS, your brakes, pad sensor, wear sensor, all that kind of stuff, your brake lines, they actually are fine. So you can go down far enough without worrying about popping those. So anyway, once you get that, you really do need a partner, because you're going to slide it out. I recommend sliding it, you know, out from the driver's side way towards this way. So that way you know that we remove the shock, right? And you only need to remove the shock on one side, because you need this room. You see right here where the bottom of the shock seated, you need that room to slide the leaf spring this way enough to get it out of the other side. And I'll show you that on the other side, how that works. And over here, you can see this is the driver's side. You know, steering rack comes loose. Everything else I said comes loose. You want to loosen the shock. You want to take the upper shock sensor off, and you want to undo the upper A-arms. Remember to get those washers behind it. But essentially what you're going to do is right back in here where the transverse leaf spring seats, and you can see right where my finger is, that's where the bolt seats right there. Take a pry bar and pry it up, and have someone pull on the other side, which if she can do it, anybody can. I mean, although she does work out and she's kind of strong, so, but anyway, I pried up on this side and she pulled it, and it just dropped right out. So that is how you take out the transverse leaf spring. And again, the reason why I'm doing that is because, yay for me, a brand new Texas Speed 416 motor that I ordered and did put together. So this is all my fault, but my dumb self, if you look up here, right up in there, that is is it the LME, the billet front timing cover. You know, and it doesn't matter if it's the front or back, but when you put the oil pan on, you've got to remember to attach the oil pressure sensor harness before you do that. And I forgot to do that. So I GM lubed up the entire oil pan, right? And then realized that I forgot to hook up the oil pressure sensor. So but I pulled the pan back off really fast, connected the sensor, did not clean the GM sealant off, thought it was still, you know, tacky enough to seal, but yeah, to my to my distress, it actually, it didn't seat. So I developed an oil leak towards the back, and so now I'm in a mess. So I'm trying to do it this way so I don't have to pull the whole motor out of the car. Because to drop this oil pan, you've got to take the oil cooler off, which runs coolant, through there. That has to get out of the way. There's 2 bolts here, and then there's 2 bolts here. That'll pop off. And then you can get to most all of the oil pan bolts right under the car. So you can see, I mean, now right here, you see these 2 right here where they go up through to the front timing cover, or the front, the front cover. Those 2 bolts completely covered by that transverse leaf spring. There was no way to get to them. So I don't know if there's some tricks to doing that, but I did not want to fool with that. So last thing to talk about is these 2 bolts here, which are the engine mount bolts. So I'm going to pop those off and jack the engine up. And jacking the engine up enough will allow me to get to these sort of last 2 oil pan bolts, which are under the subframe assembly here. They're a little hard to get to, but if you jack the engine up a little bit, you can get to those. And then I can take the oil pan and snake it out, and then redo all of the oil pan with new GM sealant, and then put it back in there carefully and hope for no more oil leaks. So that's where I'm at. I'll get you an update once we get the oil pan off. We'll look at everything, make sure. I mean, I've only got 2,000 or 3,000 miles on this Texas speed motor, so everything should be good. Pull the K-Tech valve covers off, rocker arms, everything looked beautiful. So I think once I get this oil pan off and get it back on, we'll be in good shape. All right, well, just subscribe and tune in, then I'll have more updates with these sort of, very edge case sort of solutions to these cars. Okay.